Today's gospel is a real contrast. It's a real challenge to us. It speaks to us of God's anger and at the same time, God's forgiveness. Now, whenever we think of God's anger, there's a kind of a natural inclination to go back to the Hebrew Bible and think of God as the warrior and going out and even slaughtering a whole town of men, women, and children. And yet, you know, when you look at Jesus, you find the reality of anger. Here today, he talks about someone who would harm a little child being worthy of getting a millstone wrapped around their neck and throwing them in the ocean. That's an angry statement. But Jesus was also angry at other things. Remember when he came into the temple and they were buying and selling in his Father's house. He became angry. He walked up to these money people and turned over their tables and even had a whip in his hand and drove them out and said, "My Father's house is supposed to be a house of prayer, and you're making it into a den of thieves." He could even say to Peter in anger, remember, "Get behind me, you Satan, you're not speaking the things of God." Well, as we struggle with the contrast between the anger of God and the forgiveness of God, because we have this forgiveness, we would forgive us 7 times. Let's never forget the importance of remembering that sin always affects another person. Another person is hurt. Whether it's a public sin that scandalizes a bunch of people, or even a quiet little sin, maybe in my room looking at pornography and thinking, oh, that doesn't bother anyone, and yet I'm able to really do harm to the women that I'm looking at. And we need to be people responsible for our sins. Oftentimes I've heard those that are not Catholics critical of Catholics who, because they say, oh, well, I might be a sinner, but I can go to confession, and after I go to confession, everything is cleared out, and then I can start over again. A very, very bad attitude, because that's not what the sacrament of reconciliation is about. The sacrament is a call to accepting sin as an evil and realizing that this is a serious struggle with our relationship with God. But at the same time, we always have the balance that if we are willing to say, I'm sorry, and really willing to try to do better, God will reach out and give us all the forgiveness and acceptance we look for in life.